Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. When I look back on that moment, I still wonder if I misread everything or if what happened was something I simply couldn't ignore. It all began one evening when the house was unusually quiet. My mom had stepped out, leaving me alone with my stepdad. I had always thought of him as steady and dependable, someone who filled the gap after my father was no longer around. But that night, something shifted in a way I never expected. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was subtle, almost hidden in the silence of our living room. Yet it left me questioning everything I thought I knew about him, about myself, and about the family we had built together. I remember sitting there, scrolling on my phone absent-mindedly, when he came over to say something casual, just small talk. But instead of pulling away after a laugh or a simple word, he lingered. His arms wrapped around me, not in a quick embrace, but one that felt different. It was warm, safe, but also too much. Too long. My heart beat faster as I tried to figure out if I was imagining it. Was this just a fatherly hug that I was overthinking? Or was there something unspoken happening in the quiet pause he held onto me? That's when everything started to feel complicated. Because the longer he held me, the more thoughts raced through my mind. Do I say something? Do I push him away? Or do I just stay still and pretend nothing's unusual? That single moment cracked open emotions and questions I didn't think I'd ever face. And in that hesitation, I realized this wasn't just about him. It was about me, about the choices I was about to make, and the consequences that could come with them. The strange part is, nothing outwardly dramatic happened. No raised voices, no sudden words. Just silence. Silence that carried weight. And when he finally loosened his arms, I caught his eyes lingering on me a little longer than they should have. That look left me even more confused than the embrace itself. It was as if something unspoken had just been said, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear the rest of it. Have you ever experienced a moment that seemed so small, but deep down you knew it could change everything? That's what this was for me. A tiny shift that set off waves of doubt, curiosity, and temptation. Should I talk about it? Should I pretend it never happened? Or should I try to understand what it meant for him, for me, and for us as a family? After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling from my mind. I told myself it was nothing, just me overthinking, but the memory kept replaying over and over. The warmth of his arms, the way he looked at me afterward, it wasn't something I could easily forget. It made me notice the little things I had never paid attention to before. The way he lingered when talking to me, the way his eyes softened when I laughed, or how he always made sure I was comfortable when Mom wasn't around. These details felt innocent on the surface, but they carried a weight that left me unsettled. My stepdad had always been the steady one in the house. My mom trusted him completely. He handled everything from fixing small things around the house to making sure bills were paid on time. To everyone else, he was just the dependable husband and father figure. But to me, after that night, he became a mystery. I started wondering if I had missed signs before, or if this was truly the first time something had shifted between us. Was he simply being kind, or was there something deeper that neither of us wanted to admit? I thought about my mom a lot during those days. She had no idea what had happened, and I wasn't even sure if there was anything to tell. To her, our home was normal and happy. But inside me, things weren't the same anymore. Every interaction carried an edge of tension. When we sat together at the dinner table, I caught myself wondering if he remembered the moment too. When he smiled across the room, was it just a smile, or was it a reminder? The strange part is I didn't feel afraid. Instead, I felt curious and maybe even drawn in by the attention. That's what scared me the most. There was a part of me that wanted to know what he was thinking, a part that wanted to test the boundaries of whatever this was. I kept telling myself it was wrong to even imagine that possibility, yet the thoughts slipped through no matter how much I pushed them away. As the days went on, the distance between us grew smaller, even when we weren't trying. A simple brush of his hand when passing me something. A laugh shared a little too long. Quiet moments when my mom wasn't around that seemed filled with unspoken words. Each one added to the tension, building it up like a secret neither of us dared to break. One afternoon, I found myself alone with him again. Mom had gone out shopping, and the house was quiet, just like before. I was sitting on the couch with a book in my hand, pretending to read, but my mind was anywhere but on the page. He walked in, sat down a little too close, and for a moment, it felt like time slowed down. The silence between us said more than any words could. I didn't move, and neither did he. Instead, the air felt heavy with everything unsaid. My heart raced, wondering what would happen next. Would he try to say something? Would I? Or would we both just keep pretending nothing had changed? That was the question that haunted me the most. How long can two people carry a secret tension before it finally breaks? And when it does, what kind of damage will it leave behind? Have you ever been caught in a moment where you knew something unspoken was growing, but you couldn't tell if it was real or just in your head? That's where I found myself, caught between doubt and curiosity, knowing that the smallest choice could lead to something I might never be able to undo. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope. Every interaction with my stepdad carried a hidden layer, something beneath the surface that neither of us dared to acknowledge out loud. To my mom, everything looked perfectly normal. She'd laugh at dinner, make weekend plans, and talk about work, completely unaware of the strange undercurrent growing in our home. But I noticed it more with each passing day, the way his voice softened when speaking to me, the way his eyes lingered just a moment too long, and the way silence between us felt louder than words. One evening, I caught myself watching him fix the porch light. It should have been an ordinary moment, but it wasn't. The way he focused, the strength in his hands, even the small smile he gave when he noticed me watching, it all made my chest tighten with a feeling I didn't want to name. I looked away quickly, embarrassed, yet the image stayed in my mind long after. That's when I realized the conflict wasn't only about him. It was about me too. Something inside me was pulling in two directions, one telling me to step back and keep things safe, and another whispering that maybe, just maybe, I wanted to step closer. At the same time, I started noticing how much more protective he became. He would ask if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I had eaten. To anyone else, it would have seemed like simple kindness, but to me, it felt charged with meaning. Even the smallest gestures, like handing me a glass of water, carried weight. And each one left me wondering, was I imagining it, or was he aware of the same unspoken tension I was? There were moments that almost tipped over into something more. Like the night we were watching TV, and our hands brushed against each other on the couch. Neither of us pulled away right away. The touch was accidental, or at least it should have been, but the pause that followed said otherwise. My heart pounded so hard I thought he might hear it. When I finally moved, the air between us felt thick, like a storm waiting to break. Meanwhile, I started building a world of questions in my head. What if he did feel something more? What would that mean for my mom, for our family? What if it was all just in my imagination, and I was reading too much into every little thing? That uncertainty became its own kind of torture. It made every choice feel dangerous, every silence louder, every word heavier than it should have been. But the conflict wasn't just about feelings. It was about trust, loyalty, and the invisible lines that separated right from wrong. Each day felt like testing those lines, inch by inch, without ever crossing, but knowing how close we were to doing so. And the closer we got, the harder it became to tell myself it was all in my head. Sometimes I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. His expression wasn't obvious. It wasn't something anyone else would notice, but I felt it. And when our eyes met, there was always a beat too long before he looked away. That moment, that hesitation, spoke volumes we didn't dare put into words. I started to wonder how long we could keep this balancing act before something slipped. What if one day the silence broke? What if one small choice changed everything forever? Have you ever felt like you were standing at the edge of something dangerous, but couldn't step back even if you wanted to? That's exactly where I was, caught between the pull of curiosity and the fear of what might happen next. The tension finally reached a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. Every day felt heavier, every silence sharper, and every glance between us lingered longer than it should have. It was like living inside a secret that neither of us spoke aloud, but both of us carried in every breath. My mom still moved through the house unaware, smiling and talking about normal things, while underneath, something unspoken grew stronger between me and him. The more I tried to convince myself it was nothing, the more undeniable it became. One Saturday evening, the air seemed different. Mom had gone to visit a friend, and the house was quiet again, too quiet, the kind of silence that made every small sound echo. I told myself I'd stay in my room, avoid any moments that could feel strange, but I found myself walking into the living room where he was sitting. He looked up, surprised at first, then gave me a small smile. It should have felt ordinary, but it didn't. That smile carried weight, and it pulled me in before I had a chance to stop myself. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, but it felt like there was no space at all. The TV was on, but neither of us paid attention. I could feel the energy in the room shifting, tightening like a string about to snap. My heart raced with every second of silence. I didn't want to speak, and I didn't want to move, afraid that even the smallest action might change everything. Yet at the same time, part of me wanted something to happen, something to break this endless waiting. Then came the moment that nearly tipped everything over. He leaned in slightly, not close enough to cross a line, but close enough to make my pulse quicken. His hand brushed mine, just like before, only this time he didn't move away. I froze, caught between the urge to pull back and the desire to let the moment stay. The seconds stretched on, and it felt like we were standing at the edge of something neither of us could control. In that instant, it became clear that we couldn't keep living in this silence forever. Something was going to happen, maybe not that night, maybe not the next, but soon. And when it did, everything would change. Have you ever been in a moment where you knew the next choice could alter everything about your life? That's where I was, sitting in that living room, knowing the calm couldn't last much longer. Just when I thought the silence between us couldn't stretch any further, something happened that made everything even more complicated. That night in the living room stayed with me, but instead of fading, the tension only grew sharper. It was like standing on a thin sheet of glass, knowing it could crack at any second. And then the second twist came, not from us, but from someone who wasn't supposed to notice. A few days later, my mom mentioned casually over dinner that one of the neighbors had seen us together while she was away. At first, I didn't understand what she meant, but then she added, "They said you and your stepdad looked close." She laughed it off, thinking nothing of it, but I froze. My fork hovered in the air, and my stepdad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For a moment, I thought the whole truth was about to spill out right there at the dinner table. That single comment changed everything. It wasn't just about what was happening between us anymore, it was about how fragile the secret had become. Suddenly, the idea of being seen, of someone else noticing the small gestures we thought were invisible, made the tension 10 times heavier. The walls of our house no longer felt safe. Every glance, every pause, every moment we shared carried the risk of exposure. But what shocked me even more was his reaction. Instead of pulling away after that close call, he seemed even more drawn in. His protectiveness grew, almost like he was silently telling me not to worry, that he wouldn't let anything slip. It made me feel both safe and uneasy, caught between wanting to trust him and knowing how dangerous that trust might be. The second twist came the following weekend. Mom had planned to be out late again, and the house was quiet just like before. I thought I could handle it, that I would stay strong and keep my distance. But as the night wore on, we ended up in the same room again, the unspoken tension pressing down on us harder than ever. And then, just as the moment felt like it might break, there was a sudden knock at the door. It was my aunt, arriving unexpectedly. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room quickly. Nothing had happened, but the way she looked at us made me wonder if she sensed the storm beneath the surface. Her presence was like a warning, a reminder that we weren't living in our own little world. People were watching, and one wrong move could unravel everything. That interruption left me shaken. If even my aunt could feel the strange energy between us, then how much longer could we hide it? It wasn't just about curiosity or temptation anymore. It was about risk, family, and the possibility of losing everything we cared about. And yet, the more dangerous it became, the more I felt the pull toward him. It was a conflict I couldn't untangle, fear mixed with longing, guilt tangled with desire. Every day the stakes rose higher, and every night I wondered if tomorrow would be the day the glass finally shattered beneath us. Have you ever been in a situation where the closer you got to the edge, the harder it was to step back? That's exactly where I found myself, standing between the danger of being exposed and the irresistible pull of what might happen if I stopped resisting. The breaking point came sooner than I thought. After my aunt's unexpected visit, I knew the walls were closing in. The secret tension we had been carrying could no longer stay buried. One night, Mom left again for a late shift, and the silence in the house wrapped around me like it always did. My stepdad and I ended up in the kitchen together, both pretending to be busy, both aware that this was it. Something had to give. The air was thick with everything unspoken. I could feel my hands trembling as I poured a glass of water, his presence behind me making it impossible to think straight. Finally, he broke the silence. "We can't keep doing this," he said softly, his voice low and strained. His words hit me like a wave, because for the first time, he acknowledged what we'd both been holding back. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might echo through the room. I turned to face him, and in that moment, all the weight of the past weeks came crashing down. The long hugs, the stolen glances, the tension that refused to fade, it was all real. No more guessing, no more wondering if it was just in my head. We stood there, inches apart, the truth hanging between us. I thought he might step closer, that everything would finally tip over the edge, but instead he pulled back. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. "If we cross this line, we lose everything," he said. "Your mom, this family, the life we've built, it will all fall apart." Hearing those words cut through the haze, because as much as I hated to admit it, he was right. The silence wasn't just ours anymore. It carried the weight of everyone connected to us. That should have been the end, but then came the final twist. As we stood there, trying to steady ourselves, the front door opened. My mom had come home early. She stepped into the kitchen, her eyes darting between us. The silence in the room was deafening. Nothing had happened, nothing she could point to, but the energy was undeniable. I saw the suspicion flicker in her expression, the way she lingered a little too long before forcing a smile. In that instant, I realized the secret we had been carrying wasn't safe anymore. Maybe she didn't know the details, but she sensed the change. And that unspoken awareness became the real climax of our story, not a dramatic confession, not a forbidden act, but the knowledge that the walls we thought could hold our secret were already beginning to crack. The moment my mom stepped into the kitchen and looked at us, I knew nothing would ever be the same. Even though nothing had physically happened, the silence we shared said more than words could. For the first time, I realized that secrets don't always need to be spoken to be felt. She didn't ask questions that night, and we didn't volunteer any answers. But from the way she glanced between us, from the way her voice carried a slight edge when she spoke, I could tell she sensed the shift. In the days that followed, everything slowed down. My stepdad pulled away, keeping his distance, making sure our moments together were never too long, never too close. He tried to fall back into the role of dependable husband, careful and steady. I followed his lead, reminding myself of the line we had never crossed, but had come dangerously close to. It was like we both knew that silence had saved us once, but it wouldn't save us again if we pushed any further. The conflict became less about what we wanted and more about what we stood to lose. I realized then how fragile relationships truly are, how easy it is for curiosity, attention, and longing to tip the balance of trust. My mom never confronted me about that night, but her presence became sharper, her eyes more observant. She didn't need proof, she only needed intuition. And that alone was enough to keep me from taking one step further. Looking back, I think the real lesson wasn't about romance or temptation. It was about choices. It was about learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from the edge, even when part of you wants to lean closer. The unspoken connection between me and my stepdad will always remain a memory, but that's all it can ever be, a moment that almost became something else, a moment that taught me how dangerous silence can be when feelings go unchecked. We went back to living as a family, but the air never fully cleared. There was always a quiet reminder in the background of what almost happened. Maybe that's the price of secrets. They leave shadows even after you decide to move forward. Have you ever had a moment that almost changed your life but didn't? Do you think it's better to leave some feelings unspoken, or should every truth be faced no matter the risk? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you'd like to see a sequel that explores what happens if those shadows one day return. Summary. This story followed a young woman caught in a complicated web of emotions with her stepdad. What started as a simple hug grew into silent tension, unspoken looks, and risky moments that nearly crossed the line. But just as everything built toward breaking, an unexpected twist forced them to step back and reconsider what they stood to lose. In the end, the silence between them taught a powerful lesson about choices, trust, and the fragile balance of family.